Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, "You are too arrogant. And if you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power."
Hotep, which in the language of ancient Egypt means we come with justice in peace. Welcome to Freedom Now, a Saturday Pan-Africanist and Internationalist World Affairs program. Freedom Now is committed to the principle of the rights of all peoples and nations to self-determination. We thank you deeply for your contribution to KPFK, which permits programs like Freedom Now to stay on the air. In this era of corporate acquisition and co-optation of all dissident media, we provide the microphone, challenging their corporate and racist point of view. So stay tuned for Agenda here at Freedom Now.
Habarigani. This is Sister Thage with Freedom Now's agenda for this fund drive Saturday, May 9th, 2026. We still bring you a full hour of Freedom Now power with our central theme today on Black women's struggle. We commence with our sister Luyanda Kuboka and the African Drumbeat Historical Calendar. Then, prolific author, radical historian, professor of African American Studies at the University of Houston, and Freedom Now co-producer, Dr. Gerald Horne interviews Dr. Lauren Henley, Assistant Professor of Leadership Studies at the University of Richmond in the Jepson School of Leadership Studies, and author of the book Inquisition for Blood, The Making of Black Female Serial Killer in the Jim Crow South Era. And later in the hour, Dr. Horne interviews Dr. Khiara M. Bridges, the Earl Warren Professor of Public Law at UC Berkeley School of Law, and author of the book Expecting Inequity, How the Maternal Health Crisis Affects Even the Wealthiest Black Americans. Our music clip mix includes MLK, Zap Mama, Shirley Scott, San Francisco Jazz Collective, Brandy Younger, Alice Coltrane, Baltimore Jazz Collective, and more. Our KPFK program director, Gary Baca, will be chiming in this hour to help us raise money because we are in fund drive, and so please support us to stay on the air and donate today online or by phone. You can donate at www.kpfk.org or by calling 818-985-KPFK. That's 818-985-5735. Our team here at Freedom Now, we're unpaid, and the money goes to the station for operations and more. So you can become a voting member of KPFK with the $25 donation. Again, the number to call is 818-985-KPFK. That's 818-985-5735, or donate online at kpfk.org. And sit back, phone into pledge, and as always, we stand ready for revolution.
Le néocolonialisme, le Le sionisme. L'apartheid. Foster. Ian Smith. Begin. Vive la révolution. Vive le président Sékou Touré. Vive la révolution africaine. Vive all revolutionary parties.
Aha.
Hotep, this is Sister Luyanda Koboka with Freedom Now's African Drumbeat Historical Calendar for the week of May 9th. Our objective here is to instill the spirit of social struggle by standing on the shoulders of the heroes and sheroes of bygone generations that have smashed the capitalist systems of slavery, colonialism, segregation, and faced the challenges of neocolonialism today. May 9th, 1800s. John Brown, a European abolitionist, was born. John Brown died with 2 of his sons on a God-inspired mission to overthrow the slaveocracy of the United States at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. He mobilized African slaves under the banner of the Bible to slaughter plantation owners. May 9th, 1920. Celia Sanchez, the Eva Perón of Cuba, was born. She was a warrior. She created orphanages, organized the Marian Grajales women's military platoons. She helped founded the Federation of Cuban Women. These programs empowered women as equals in the liberation of Cuba and its consolidation into a socialist state. May 10th, 1969. The South African student organization SASO was founded. SASO continued the global tradition of students becoming organized revolutionary intellectuals, a critical component in the building of liberation movements and revolutionary parties, providing cadre for the Pan-Africanist Congress and the African National Congress, as well as for AZAPO. May 10th, 1930. United Farm Workers leader and co-founder Dolores Huerta was born. Ms. Huerta organized agricultural workers to demand better pay and working conditions in the face of mafia-controlled grape vineyards and state politicians in the fields of Central California. Dolores, together with Cesar Chavez and thousands of laborers, organized the most militant strikes in the 60s here in the United States. May 11th, 1981. Bob Marley, Pan-African reggae artist and advocate of African liberation and unity, dies. Bob Marley, the most well-known Rastafarian artist, spread the teachings of African pride, unity, and revolution throughout the world and swelled the ranks of the Rastafarian movement with our teachings of love, unity, and black pride. May 12, 1928. Sam Jumo, president of SWAPO, the Southwest African People's Organization, was born. SWAPO was a mass popular people's movement which successfully defeated the European antilopers backed by the racist United States and South African governments in the decolonization struggle of Namibia, located in southern Africa. May 13, 1985, Wilson Goode, the Negro mayor of Philadelphia, authorized the bombing of MOVE headquarters that destroyed 61 homes and killed several Africans. MOVE, an African communal movement stressing healthy living, African culture, and anti-capitalist values. May 13, 1551. The University of Mexico was founded, which was the first university to be created in North America. May 13, 1950. Stevland Morris, Stevie Wonder, singer, composer, and activist, was born. Stevie Wonder has done benefit concerts for the liberation movements in Southern Africa. He has organized and financed the national movement to make Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday a national holiday, and is the only African musician that owns his own radio station and has been producing consciously uplifting music for the last 40 years. May 14th, 1888, slavery was abolished in Brazil and replaced by forced wage labor. Brazil, which has the largest African population in the Western Hemisphere, has maintained many African traditions from the pre-colonial period. Next week, we will have an overview of the contemporary struggle in Brazil with Brother Bakari. This is Freedom Now at 90.7 FM in Southern California, 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara, and broadcasting live worldwide on the web at www.kpfk.org. To communicate with Freedom Now, please drop us an email at freedomnow@kpfk.org. As in our tradition, we would like to close out this section of our program with a unity chant of all power to the people. Amandla.
Away-to.
Amandla.
Away-to.
Amandla.
Away-to.
This is KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles. I'm Gary Baca here for Freedom Now, asking you to go to your phone. We are significantly behind in our station's goal, and we're asking you to pledge for Freedom Now with Dr. Gerald Horne, a historian, scholar, talks about the history and discrimination that has plagued America. This can be heard every Saturday from 11 to 12 p.m. When we talk about the meaning of Freedom Now, it represents an urgent, contemporary demand for the immediate reclamation of inalienable human rights, focusing on overcoming systemic oppression, displacement, and the fight for peace. Freedom Now, what does that mean today? The active defense of rights. It's a call to protect individuals from government repression. Donald Trump and the Trump administration. Freedom Now, featuring advocacy for those wrongly imprisoned and ensuring human rights are upheld in volatile regions. Freedom from fear. It encompasses freedom from economic insecurity, violence, and the fear of being targeted, allowing people to live without constant anxiety. Freedom is a big word and has a huge meaning. 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK. That's the number to call to pledge your support. Hit option 2 and that goes to the phone room. And in this way, we keep Freedom Now on the air and we keep free speech alive. Cultural and global action. Freedom Now, it is increasingly expressed through global cross-cultural collaboration to assert that freedom is a universal right, not restricted by nationality or background. Freedom Now, the modern understanding, highlights the need to balance personal liberties, challenging the rise of authoritarian control. Freedom Now is a proactive, often urgent demand for immediate justice, safety, in the face of ongoing real-world threats. 818-985-5735. Keep freedom alive. Keep freedom now. 818-985-5735 in the great work that Gerald Horne has been doing, researching the history of racism and discrimination. Who does this but KPFK? I'm Gary Baca, and I'm asking you to go to your phone and please pledge your support. That $25, that $50 goes a long way for racism and discrimination. It exposes the truth, and you hear it here on KPFK. Donald Trump and his henchmen, they're going to be in our spotlight. We're going to be watching them closely. We are not supported by corporate entities, colleges, universities, the federal government. We are Freedom Now, and we are free speech to do what we need to do for the public of Los Angeles and Southern California. So if you want truth to power, if you need the truth, then keep us on the air so that we remain vigilant and resistant. 818-985-5735. Call now. 818-985-5735. Call now for Freedom Now. Do you know the struggle that we had to go through to become free? Especially if you're Black in America, Native American, Mexican, especially Italian, Irish, Scottish. A lot of us are here with backgrounds from different countries, but we created America. We're the ones that built the White House. We're the ones that built mansions from slave labor, stole the land from the Native Americans, and then built homes on slave labor. Does that sound right? Well, hey, it was hundreds of years ago, and let's forget that. Let's forget about reparations. Let's forget about taking care of the Native American people and living close to them, living with them, and learning about the earth, Mother Earth, planting, taking care of it, but instead drilling, contaminating the oceans, the air. I hate to say it, but it almost sounds like corporate America will destroy us. Who else does Trump want to start trouble with? Canada, Mexico, Greenland, China. He's despicable. And I say that because his ratings are low. And most people will probably agree by now. So once again, folks, Freedom Now is a show that runs here every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And it's really important that we get you to the phones right now. Freedom Now, the power or right to speak, act, and change as one wants without hindrance or restraint. Freedom is a right. Freedom to say what you believe in. 818-985-5735.
For KPFK Radio, this is Gerald Horne, and with me on the line is Lauren Nicole Henley, Assistant Professor in the Jepson School of Leadership at the University of Richmond in Virginia, and author of the book Inquisition for Blood, The Making of a Black Female Serial Killer in the Jim Crow South. Thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK Los Angeles, Professor Henley.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So why did you produce this book?
Sure. So I started out interested in Black women and girls who were accused of a variety of crimes in the South in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And over time, I explored various things from Black female juvenile reformatories to Black women and girls as the victims of serial killers. And at some point, this all kind of converged serendipitously around a project that was being conducted by Shawande Mustaqim at Washington University in St. Louis, looking at Black women who committed infanticide. And we were building a data set of Black women accused of killing their children and stumbled upon a woman named Clementine Barnabé, who seemed in many reports to have killed quite a few children. And we quickly realized they weren't her children, and she was not exclusively killing children, supposedly. There were also adults involved as well. And so I thought this might be the making of a Black female serial killer, or at least somebody who was reported to be a Black female serial killer. And over time, over more than a decade of research, I decided to write a book about Clementine's case and try to untangle the lore of the crime she was accused of committing from those that she possibly could have committed.
So who was Clementine Barnabé? What was she accused of? What was her locale? What was her class background?
So Clementine Barnabé was a young Black woman who grew up in the Rice Belt of Louisiana, particularly Lafayette, in the early 1900s. What we know about her background is a little bit murky due to the lack of records, but it seems that she had a rather tumultuous upbringing. Her dad was, at minimum, not particularly well liked in his community, and probably was someone with an alcohol addiction and appeared to be somewhat abusive to his family members. She had a couple of siblings, including a brother, who was later implicated in some of the same crimes as her, and for that matter, so too was her father. She worked as a domestic in white households in and around Lafayette in the early 1900s, just like most Black women at this point in American history. And importantly for her saga, she was accused of murdering dozens of Black people in Louisiana and eventually Texas from November 1909 until August 1912. What's important about the accusations versus her confessions is that she was physically behind bars when more than half of the murders attributed to her occurred. She did, however, take credit for killing 17 people. Of those 17, she could have theoretically killed them, meaning she was not behind bars when those crimes occurred. They were all within a 25-mile radius of Lafayette, and there's no evidence to show that she was anywhere other than in Lafayette during those crimes.
So with regard to her case, what was the role of age, race, gender, and religion, especially hoodoo?
Yeah, so Clementine was young at the time of her most famous confession, which was April of 1912. A lot of newspapers reported she was 19, and that's generally the age I've accepted in my work. And that's the age that's recorded when she was eventually sentenced to life without capital punishment at the Louisiana State Penitentiary in October of 1912. And so I'm really interested in this nexus of Black girlhood and Black womanhood, and trying to understand why, for example, the Chicago Defender would label her as just a silly child when most white newspapers described her as a negress murderess, right? And these really sort of violent depictions of her as particularly harmful to American society at this point. Relatedly is, of course, race. This is Louisiana in the Jim Crow South. And so her race permutates depending upon the context. At times, she is described as a beautiful Creole. At times, she's mulatto and just 1/8 Black, all the way up to being half Black, and at some point, just like any other Black female domestic servant in Louisiana at this point. And so her race becomes fungible and very much associated with her perceived criminality. And then lastly, religion plays a fascinating role in her case, because when she initially is roped into these murders, she's actually connected through her dad. Her dad is tried for one of the crimes that occurred in the spring of 1911. And in the court records of her dad's trial, Clementine says that she's Catholic. And then by the time she confesses, first in November of 1911, and then again in April of 1912, she says that God compelled her to kill, and later that she sought a hoodoo from a hoodoo doctor in New Iberia. And he, I guess, cautioned her or let her know that if she wanted to commit criminal acts using this hoodoo, that it would protect her. And at some point, she lost her hoodoo, tried to recreate this charm, and was unsuccessful. And she says that that is why she is able to confess, and ultimately why she is apprehended and shares her saga. And it seems clear to me that these different depictions of religion could, in theory, in somewhere like Louisiana, coexist as the syncretic expression of various faith practices within a given community. And yet, newspapers, particularly white print media, extrapolates the crimes to be committed by voodoo practitioners, which shows a really bad conflation of Black faith practices in the South at this point.
So, as I understand it, the crimes for which she was accused were quite violent, in fact, involving an axe, if I'm not mistaken. And if she did not commit these crimes, who did?
Yeah, so the crimes she is accused of committing are often labeled as the Axeman crimes. And the gist of it is that somebody would break into Black households in the dark of night. All of these households, with the exception of one, were within a mile of the sunset route of the Southern Pacific Railroad's line. And they would kill every single person within that residence until the very, very end, when a couple of people did survive. And they used a common pole axe and at times supplemental weapons like knives, smoothing irons, a gun, and or posthumous positioning of the bodies. So doing things like stacking them on a bed, moving them from one room to another. This individual might have cleaned either the axe or their hands, left bloody water everywhere, that kind of thing. And so all the crimes are very, very similar. And I think importantly, again, the ones Clementine took credit for, she could have done temporally. And yet, because we know that she was behind bars when more than half of the murders occurred, The way that I think about Another Suspect is to use the rhetoric of Black communities at that time, which is they define this person as the Axeman. They gendered this person as a man, and they were very confident that it was somebody who was out to target Black families. Now, whether that was another Black person or a white person varied depending on the community. And so I think the best way for me to answer this would be to actually think about my conversation I had with the descendants of the last family that believed that they were attacked by the Axeman in San Antonio in August of 1912. And this family survived and moved out to California immediately after the attack. And what they believe, and what I think is important in doing this kind of work, is to honor the victims and honor oral histories. And they believe that the Axeman was actually two white men. And I don't know who they are. I don't have names. I have nothing of that kind, but that is their truth. And I think it's worth putting that out there as well.
So you said they moved to California. Was it Southern California?
I believe they moved to San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco. Okay. I take it you're familiar with Collie Gross and her work, particularly Vengeance Feminism.
Yes.
And Nikki Taylor and her work, Brooding Over Bloody Revenge, Enslaved Women, Wild Justice, and Lethal Resistance to Slavery. To what extent does your work comport or diverge from theirs?
Yes, so both Callie Gross and Nikki Taylor, and I guess myself, we're all scholars of Black women's criminal history. And in that regard, I think we are interested in finding Black women who are believed to or did exist at the margins of acceptable society and engaging in criminal acts and criminal enterprises for a variety of reasons. Where my work diverges is that I do think both Callie and Nikki give a lot more credence to wanting to explore those reasons than I think is always necessarily the most productive. And the reason I say that is because one of my key interventions is trying to make sure people understand Black women as capable of expressing a range of human behaviors, from the most abhorrent to the most, lauded and celebrated. And I think there has been a trend within Black women's history to want to be responsible and respectful and engage in a rhetoric of motive, or at least of justification. And I think we've done a phenomenal job in Black women's criminal history of showing, for example, Black women who might, say, steal from an employer as a form of reparations, or might take some sort of liberty to abscond as an attempt at autonomy, or might, in Callie Gross's case, rob men as Johns in order to usurp power systems in play in Philadelphia, say in the early 1900s. And I think all of this has its place. And yet, we do not require white men to have to explain themselves. We totally accept that if somebody like, say, Ted Bundy says, wow, I just had a good time killing young white female college co-eds, that's okay. And yet we want Black women, both as a society and as scholars, we want a motive behind it. And we often want that motive to be associated with how Black women operate within our current structure, be it related to racism or sexism or anything of that sort. And for me, Clementine's case is one example where we might step back and ask, how much does motive need to be at the fore of her potential actions? Could she have done exactly what she said she did, which was draw the short end of a stick related to a hoodoo and go out and test it by committing murder? Are we actually comfortable as a society and as scholars with Black women doing something either just because they want to have fun, because there might be mental illness involved, because maybe they're just not a great person? Are we actually okay with that? And so I think both Callie's work and Nikki's work works towards a motive. And right now it's framed around feminism, Black women's feminism. And I think that that's lovely. But I also want to push that conversation forward and ask, what if there actually isn't a motive that we as a society deem to be acceptable? Is that still okay to talk about?
With regard to this question of motive, why do you think society, as you put it, and scholars demand a certain kind of motive? What is the rationale underpinning that?
Yeah, so I think it varies depending upon the demographic. I think as a society writ large, we just are generally interested in trying to explain behaviors that seem atypical or deviant. I think as scholars, particularly scholars of Black women's history, the desire to legitimate this discipline since the 1980s has come in a lot of ways and has been challenged by academia writ large, by predominantly white institutions that have said that either there's nothing to study or what would you possibly gain from learning about Black women. And so in order to explain the utility of the field, I think we spent a lot of time showing it in a sort of logical or methodological way that requires rationalization and justification. And that has led to, as we know, the politics of respectability, I actually think extending even into something like Black women's criminal history, where we want there to be some bigger motive behind why someone might engage in a criminal or criminalized act. And I think a lot of times, yes, that motive is there. But I also want to ask, what happens if it's not? What happens if someone just wants to do what they want to do for no other reason than they want to do it? We let white men do that all the time. But we don't always want Black women to be capable of just existing as people. And so that for me is part of what I'm trying to uncover.
As a footnote, the audience may be interested in our previous interviews, which you can find online, of Kali Gross and Vengeance Feminism and Nikki Taylor and Brooding Over Bloody Revenge. Finally, Lauren Nicole Henley, author of the book Inquisition for Blood, The Making of a Black Female Serial Killer in the Jim Crow South. What's next on your research agenda? And could you elaborate on that infanticide project that you described at the top?
Yeah, so I am no longer involved in the infanticide project, but I am still hunting for Black women who commit murder. So what's next is trying to test out if my methodology in Inquisition for Blood is something that was exceptional to Clementine's case, or if in fact there are more Black female serial killers in American history than we've ever known to have existed. So I'm looking for some others, and I think I have one who might just qualify.
Oh, are you able to reveal where that person might be at least?
That person might have been in Beaumont, Texas.
Oh, fair enough. Well, we look forward with eager anticipation to that new project as well, Professor Henley. But I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK, Los Angeles.
Thank you.
818-985-5735. The 5 basic freedoms protected by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution are the freedom of religion, speech, the press, assembly, and the right to petition the government. That's what we're doing. And what are they doing? They're smashing us, smashing windows. If you simply drive away, they'll shoot at your car. Doesn't matter if you have kids in the back seat. Most people are saying, just stay there, get arrested. That's not how we do it in America. That's not how it's done. We already know that there had been deportations in the past through Biden and Obama, and people have their opinion on that. 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK. Freedom now, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom from the press. What does that mean? The right for media, newspapers, online news to report information without government censorship. First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Freedom of speech, the right to voice opinions and ideas through words, symbols, or actions. Freedom of religion, the right to believe or not believe in a religion and to practice it freely. Freedom now. Freedom of assembly, the right to gather peacefully in groups. We have a right to do that. That's what freedom's all about. And that's why it's important that Freedom Now stays on the air. Freedom to petition, the right to ask the government to fix problems or make changes. So my people, I'm talking to you. We're fighting the big fight. How about you? You think you can support us in an easy way by pledging your support of $25, $50 for all the volunteers here that keep it going? That money would not go to the volunteers as much as we like to give it to them. It goes to keep the antenna transmitter working properly. A giant transmitter on Mount Wilson from a little radio station that has big topics and big opinions and big facts. 818-985-5735. We are offering Michelle Alexander the new Jim Crow book, and this is for a $100 donation. Talking about Jim Crow today. Jim Crow is actually happening today, right now. You probably don't even know about it. So if you take time to go to your phone, pledge your support, you not only get the book, but you get the companion talk, recorded in the Bay Area by Michelle Alexander. If you haven't heard it, it is ear-opening. And it tells you the truth about the facts of people of color, especially men, in the prison system and how they got there. I think one of the biggest things in life for a person of color, such as myself and maybe you or someone you know, is that you want to stay out the justice system. It's so easy to get caught up through a traffic ticket, turns into a warrant, they take your license, they jail you, because you can't afford it. You can't afford the ticket. 818-985-5735. The 5 freedoms are internationally accepted standards of care that affirm every living being's right to humane treatment. Freedom now. Freedom of speech and expression, peaceful assembly or association. 818-985-5735. Please call. We're down to the wire. We only have a few pledges. We're not even halfway to our goal, which is $1,000. Time is running out, and we are short a little bit over $500. Can you help us? That $100 goes a long way. Freedom now, freedom of speech. Freedom is a right. Freedom gives citizens basic freedom with respect to speech and expression. It's important to understand the scope of these provisions and any exceptions thereof. 818-985-5735. We are getting one pledge that's coming in. I just want to let you know about this Blues and Jazz Queens collection. You get, for a $160 donation called a phone room, Ella Fitzgerald Icon 2 CD set, Essential Nina Simone 2 CD set, Ken Burns Billie Holiday CD, and Etta James Best Of CD for a $160 donation. Thank you gift to you for pledging online at kpfk.org or calling 818-985-5735.
For KPFK Radio, this is Gerald Horne, and with me on the line is Khiara Bridges, Earl Warren Professor of Public Law at UC Berkeley Law School and author of the book Expecting Inequity: How the Maternal Health Crisis Affects Even the Wealthiest Black Americans. Thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK Los Angeles, Professor Bridges.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So why write this book? And by the way, what is the maternal health crisis and how does it affect even the wealthiest Black Americans?
Sure, yes. So the maternal health crisis refers to the fact that in the United States, compared to the nations that we like to call our peers, people in the United States are dying at elevated rates from preventable deaths, which is to say that the United States is one of only a few industrialized nations that have witnessed an increase in their maternal mortality rates. Most industrialized nations have managed to reduce the rates of pregnancy-related deaths over the years, and the United States has been experiencing a steady uptick in those pregnancy-related deaths. So that is the maternal health crisis as a general matter. But the Black maternal health crisis refers to the fact that Black people are dying much more frequently than their white counterparts from pregnancy-related deaths. And currently, the rate is 3 to 4 times that of white women, which is to say that Black people are 3 to 4 times more likely than their white counterparts to die from a pregnancy-related death. So that is the Black maternal health crisis in a nutshell, and that is why I wrote the book. I thought that it was important to spend some focused attention on why this crisis exists, and why it has persisted. There's nothing new about this crisis, I should mention. This isn't a new occurrence. This hasn't, developed in the last 10 to 20 years. Rather, in the 1900s, epidemiologists first started counting the rates at which people were dying from pregnancy-related causes. And Black people in the 1900s were dying at twice the rates as their white counterparts. And that disparity has increased over time. And so now we're in 2026. And we're dying at 3 to 4 times the rate as our white counterparts. So the book investigates where this crisis originated, why it persists, and why we're not doing anything about it, and what it will take to eliminate it finally.
Now, per the subtheme of your book, how it affects even the wealthiest Black Americans, much in the news not so long ago was the case of the pregnancy of the billionaire pop star Beyonce. Does her case relate to your book at all?
Absolutely. So that statistic that I already recited with Black people dying at 3 to 4 times the rate as their white counterpart, that statistic actually hides the fact that these racial disparities persist across income levels. And so a lot of people might hear that statistic and say, oh, Black people are dying from, during pregnancy, childbirth, and the postpartum period because Black people disproportionately bear the burdens of poverty in the U.S., and that's certainly true. And we do know that poverty it does a magnificent job of sickening and killing people. But the reality is that wealthier Black people are dying much more frequently than their wealthier white counterparts. In fact, wealthier white people are dying, the disparity between the rates at which wealthier Black people and wealthier white people die are actually greater than the rates at which poor Black people and poor white people die. So essentially, as you move up the socioeconomic ladder, it exposes Black people to a particular type of vulnerability that's just not present for our lower income counterparts. And so, yes, Beyonce's story demonstrates that we can't buy our way out of anti-Blackness in the United States. We can't purchase our way out of structural racism. And so the fact that Beyonce experienced preeclampsia during her pregnancy is one of the wealthiest women, Black women in the world, one of the wealthiest people in the world, right? Experienced something that could have killed her during her pregnancy. We can also talk about Serena Williams, who suffered a pulmonary embolism during her pregnancy. During her childbirth, she reported her symptoms to her healthcare team, who dismissed her. So again, one of the wealthiest and also healthiest Black people in the world couldn't manage to make their money make them more audible. Their money did not make them able to be heard by their healthcare providers. And so these are the sorts of stories that are the engine behind Expecting Inequity. I wanted to investigate how it is that racism shows up in the lives of Black people who are imagined to have purchased an escape from anti-Blackness. And I also wanted to investigate what these folks were doing to survive in a country that seems to be perfectly satisfied with letting them die preventable deaths.
So what does your book tell us about the peril of underestimating anti-Black racism?
Well, my book, the punchline of the book is there is no escape from anti-Blackness. We can't buy our way out of it. We can't educate our way out of it. We can't date our way out of it. We can't marry our way out of it. Anti-Blackness shows up, of course, in interpersonal encounters. And so there might be ways of tempering it, right? In my book, I talk about how class-privileged Black people intentionally perform their class privilege during their clinical encounters, during their doctor's appointments, because they know that it matters, that if their providers perceive them to be educated and to have the vocabulary, they might be perceived as deserving of reproduction, and then they will receive the health care that they deserve, that everybody deserves. So, of course, anti-Blackness shows up in interpersonal interactions. But one of the biggest lessons of my book is that anti-Blackness shows up in structural conditions. It shows up in the residential segregation that even wealthier Black people can escape. It shows up in epigenetics, which is not genetic variation. There's no argument that Black people possess some race-specific genetic variation that causes them to die, but rather it's the way that our genes are expressed. And our genes are expressed as a product of our environments. And so when we live in hostile environments, our genes are expressed in a way that is contrary to health and life. And so that structural racism impacts our genetic expression and causes us to have complications that our white counterparts don't have because they don't exist in hostile environments. Anti-Blackness shows up in weathering. This is a concept first introduced by a public health researcher, Arlene Geronimus, which just shows that when you're exposed to chronic stress, your body systems age, your organs are actually older as a result of chronic stress. And of course, racism is probably one of the most stressful things that we can encounter in the world, in the globe. And so that sort of structural racism is not something that we can, swipe a credit card and escape. It's not something that we can articulate our way out of. And so the solution doesn't involve, simply giving our providers cultural competence workshops or whatnot. Instead, the solution involves eliminating racism from the United States and the globe more broadly.
Now, in an earlier book, you discussed Medicaid and pregnancy. What do you uncover, especially regarding disrespect, privacy, and abuse?
Sure. Yeah, my first book was focused on low-income people of color who were Medicaid insured and received their health care, their prenatal care, from a public hospital in New York City, and I call the hospital Alpha. And I uncovered that it's really, very difficult to hold on to your dignity, your autonomy, your agency, your bodily integrity when you are low income and you need the state for anything, including something that ought to be a right, which is health care. And so that book was highly critical of the Medicaid apparatus because, first, there was the chaos that is part and parcel of going to an underfunded, understaffed, overburdened institution, which are the institutions that we designate in this country to care for those who don't have class privilege, those who are impoverished. So there's the chaos that's part and parcel of that. And part of, being an institution that is understaffed and overburdened is that one will be treated to indignities and hostilities. And this is not a critique of the people who work there as like, oh, these are sort of idiosyncratic character flaws, but rather it's structural in nature. These folks are not getting paid the value of their labor, and they're being asked to accomplish these Herculean tasks of caring for this marginalized population on a shoestring budget. So there was that aspect of the Medicaid sort of healthcare apparatus that I investigated in Reproducing Race. But then there's also the highly regulatory aspect of Medicaid, which is Medicaid dictates the minutia of the care that is delivered to Medicaid insured folks. And so that reduces patient autonomy, but it also reduces provider discretion. And I was highly critical of the entire enterprise in Reproducing Race. But when I turned to write Expecting Inequity, I learned that autonomy reduction may actually be anti-racist in the sense that it reduces the space for provider discretion, which is where implicit biases show up that might result in inferior health care given to class privileged folks. So there's this tension. And I asked the question in the book, what does racial justice look like when the apparatus that might produce it, that might reduce racial inequities, denies autonomy, reduces discretion, denies agency. So we're in a sort of catch-22 with that.
Speaking of which, what is, quote, implicit bias, unquote, and what is your critique of that concept?
Right. So implicit bias is empirically true, right? It is. There's no question that implicit bias exists. And so implicit bias simply refers to the fact that most people have aversions and associations of which they are unconscious. And so the idea is that although I might profess to be racially egalitarian, although I might profess to believe that we all are created equal, so in my subconscious, in my unconscious life, I might associate Black men with criminals, and I might associate Black women with welfare queens, and I might associate Latinx people with undocumented rapists. And the fact of implicit bias has been demonstrated to impact the way that people interact with others in the real world. So although people might be unaware that they associate Black men with criminals, and although they might deny vehemently that they think of criminality when they see a Black man, they will, when they interact with Black men, they will be more suspicious. They will be more protective of themselves. They will make less eye contact. And, you know, in the healthcare space, they might disbelieve the Black man is telling the truth when the Black man reports that he's in pain. They might not suggest a medical intervention for the Black man that they might for a non-Black person. And so that is what implicit bias is. And, you know, I don't deny the existence of it. I don't deny that implicit bias impacts the quality of the healthcare that people who have implicit biases give to their patients. My critique of implicit bias is that it's kind of like a black hole of explanation for racial inequality in the post-civil rights era. Implicit bias, we've turned to it to explain every single racial injustice. So, you know, when George Floyd is kneeled on, when a cop kneels on George Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes and kills him, we wonder, pundits wonder, politicians wonder, is it because that police officer had an implicit bias? When cops shoot unarmed Black men, is it because of implicit bias? I talk about in the book how there was an incident at Starbucks many years ago where the manager called the police on 2 Black men who were just sitting there waiting for a friend, which is what people do in Starbucks. And the manager called the police on them, and Starbucks closed all their stores in order to give their managers and their employees an implicit bias training. And so my critique of implicit bias is that we are asking it to do entirely too much. Surely some of the racial injustices that we witness are a function of implicit biases, but a lot more racial injustices are a product of explicit biases, but also structural inequities. And so if the problem is implicit bias, the answer is to cure people of their implicit biases. But if the problem is structural inequity, well, then the answer is a redistribution of opportunity and wealth in this country, a reformation of the country. And I'm much more interested in the latter than in the former.
Now, you just alluded to what is to be done, but would you care to elaborate on that point?
Absolutely. So, in the final chapter of the book, I too have become frustrated with conversations that identify the problem, but do not pose solutions to the problem. And so, I will just go through a few. There's so many interventions we can make, but it is the profit motive that underlies the U.S.'s healthcare delivery system is killing us. Really, it's perverting the decisions that people are making within these institutions. It's much more profitable for a healthcare institution, for a provider to give intensive medicalized treatment and care to a premature infant than it is to send a healthy baby home. It's much more lucrative to give a C-section to a person in labor than to wait for a vaginal birth. And so that profit motive, whether a provider or an institution is consciously aware of it, or whether they're unconsciously aware of it, it's perverting or unconsciously unaware of it. It's perverting the decisions that people are making within our hospitals. It's perverting the decisions that providers are making, and it's corrupting the quality of the care that is given to everyone. Our 2-tiered healthcare system, I can't imagine a country in which we have eliminated racial disparities in maternal mortality and in which we have retained the two-tier healthcare system where we have Medicaid insured and uninsured people in the bottom tier trying to receive their healthcare from these institutions that are overburdened and understaffed, while everybody else, the commercially insured, receives their healthcare from institutions that are well-resourced. So we will have to move to something like a single-payer system and get rid of the two-tier healthcare system in order to eliminate racial disparities in health and in maternal mortality specifically. But probably the most important intervention that we have to make is we have to take racism seriously. We can't try to solve problems of race and racism through race-neutral means. We cannot be colorblind in our solutions and expect them to dismantle centuries of racial inequities that have become embedded in our institutions, in our discourses, in our narratives, in our ways of thinking. So we have to confront racism head on. As I say in the book, anti-Blackness is deadly, it's lethal, it's killing us. Is showing up in chronic stress, is showing up in weathering of our body systems, is showing up in the expression of our genes. And we're not going to eliminate weathering and epigenetic problems that we might have and so on and so forth until we take racism seriously. It can't be that we navigate hostile environments all day long by simply waking up being Black in the country, and then we expect us not to have hypertension and kidney disease and asthma and COVID and so on and so forth. So the primary intervention we need to make is to come to terms with our racist past, our racist present, and then work doggedly to eliminate it.
Finally, Khiara Bridges, author of the book Expecting Inequity, what's next on your research agenda?
Yes, I love that question because I actually have an answer to it. One of the things that happens to me is when I'm writing a book, there are these questions that emerge from the work and that I don't have time really or the space in the existing project to address. And so as I was researching Expecting Inequity, I would hear these stories from, postpartum Black folks, people who had babies, where they would have like these horrible, labor and delivery stories, or these horrible stories about the prenatal care that they received from their doctors. And, at the end of these stories, I would ask them, so you think this is because you were Black, right? It's like if you were white, that lady wouldn't have said that to you. Or if you were white, they would have given you time to labor. They wouldn't have, essentially coerced you to have a C-section. And I would ask these questions, and never did the folks who I was talking to, never did they say absolutely. Never did they say like definitively, like, yes, this was a function of racism. More likely or more frequently, they were like, well, I think so, or I'm not sure. It's hard to tell. Maybe they were having a bad day, right? So, and it struck me as like ghostly, like the way that racism was showing up was like this specter, like this thing that you can't point to it and say there it is, but it's like it's haunting you, it's haunting your experiences. So that led me to my next book project, which I am working on. We'll be working on in earnest over the summer and the rest of this year. And it's tentatively titled Ghost Stories, Racism and the Haunting of America. And it's just how racism impacts our lives in the post-civil rights era, where it's not like this ostentatious and obvious, KKK burning a cross on your lawn, but it's more subtle, it's more eerie. It's this sense, this haunting sense that you have been impacted negatively because of your Black race. So I'm going to flesh that out over the course of a couple hundred pages.
Well, we all look forward with eager anticipation to that book, Khiara Bridges, author of Expecting Inequity. But I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK, Los Angeles.
Thank you. It was a joy.
And in closing, we'd like to thank everybody who donated this hour to support us to stay on the air. Thank you to our guests, Dr. Lauren Henley, Dr. Khiara Bridges. Thank you to our producers, Dr. Gerald Horne, Brother Brandon, Sister Flora. Thank you, Anthony Ballas. Thank you to our board op Sly and all those who made today's program possible. Shout out Gary Baca. Please stay tuned for more Fund Drive programming coming up next. Signing off for Freedom Now, this is Sister Thage, and as always we stand ready for revolution.
We state these facts only to let you know that those of us who are revolutionary, Pan-Africanists, is not because we love revolution. It is historically determined, and we have no alternative but to follow history and to use history for the benefit of our people.
Power to the people. Power to the people.